So, on the topic of Unreal Engine 5 main games and all the issues that these games have had lately, a lot of people have asked, well, why don't developers make their own engine? Wouldn't that take care of all those problems? The issue is, in my opinion, without off the shelf engines like Unreal, Unity, or Godot, we wouldn't have these great indie games that we have nowadays. See, Silksong was made with Unity, Clair Obscur was made with Unreal, Wukong was made with Unreal, Split Fiction was made with Unreal. Aside from all the bad games that have been made with Unreal, a lot of great games have been made with Unreal. A lot of great games have been made with Unity. And in my opinion, these games would not exist if it wasn't for off the shelf engines. Indie studios usually don't have the money to spend on years on developing an engine because developing an engine, especially for 3D, can take up years. However, I brought somebody that is an expert on the subject and he's going to talk about that. Well, Docs, he's been on the channel before. If you're familiar with the channel, remember this is a little bit of a more technical talk, so leave your questions down below and your comments. Remember to sub to Wild Docs, and let's get started.
Yeah, so this is where I would say that there's probably not a best solution. So there's pros and cons to both, right? So like let's say you're Bungie and you're developing Halo and you know what your target is. You can tailor that engine to be the most performant around the goal that you're working on the game to run. So that's where, you know, you've always heard people say like Unreal Engine is like way back in the day, UE3, right? UE3 is a first-person shooter engine, and that was because it was born on the back of Unreal Tournament 2003, and it was primarily known for first-person shooters. And there was a little bit of truth to that early on, where it took it a little bit of work and a little bit of massaging from studios to get it to do other things. But some really great games, Batman, Sam Fisher, a lot of third-person games came out of it eventually, and then platformers and mobile games. So the benefit of having an off-the-shelf engine, especially one that's open source like Unreal, let me use that term lightly, one that's source available like Unreal, because an open source engine is more closer to like Godot. MIT license, truly open source. You fork it, it's yours. You maintain it. Like they'll never rip it out from under you. There is no stipulations behind licensing. At the end of the day, Epic is source available, meaning you have access to the source, but they don't ever have to pull your PRs. You pay a license, royalties at the end of the day. If you're an organization, you agree to a EULA, and ultimately you don't ever own the engine. That it's not yours. Something can change, and meaning the license can be adjusted after the fact in some way, shape, or form. It's a risk that everyone kind of agrees to that uses Unreal. But the benefit is you have a collective pool of developers and artists now that can contribute back to the engine, meaning you're not on the fence for maintaining those changes by yourself. You have kind of the I can stand on the backs of giants, and accept the help from like let's just say The Witcher whenever they contribute back to the engine. However, when it comes to an engine like UE5 this early out of the gate, what it means is you have a lot of churn. You have a lot of experimental features that go through a lot of changes, and it creates instability. You might pull a version, merge down from main, and boom, you can't build lights. Or instant stereo is broken, mobile multi-view is broken. They change something out from underneath you. So that's the downfall, is that you have changes coming in that you have to babysit that isn't necessarily part of your internal team. So that's where LTS for Unity has really helped out. People can go, I can go to this, it doesn't have a lot of changes, it's going to be stable, et cetera, et cetera. And that's probably why a lot of people have been kind of on this outcry for Unreal Engine to have something very similar. Do all of your experimentation in, whatever your unstable thing is, But instead, we have the status quo where people are like, don't pull a dot zero or a dot one. It could ruin. Like, you have to have this fundamental underlying knowledge of the instability of how Unreal Engine is to know that a release isn't really a release. It could be kind of a preview in disguise. So that's the downfall of, you know, having an off the shelf type of thing. The other downfall is that Epic at any point in time, and we've seen this with UE5, can go, hey, we care more about this area of entertainment. We care more about film production, short films, Lego doing their thing, Disney doing their thing, and the gaming portion of the market could have a little bit of struggles going on. So it really is their prerogative to decide, because it's their engine, what direction they kind of take with it. If they want to lean into RTX and ray tracing, well, everyone who didn't want to go that direction is kind of pulled along for the ride. If it's an in-house engine, the benefits there are you're the ones maintaining it. Nothing changes without your knowledge. You can tailor that engine and really squeeze every last ounce of optimization out of that engine. And you'll see this in the latest Metal Gear Solid. I would say that studio has only had very few occasions where they've made a release and the game didn't perform where it should perform for that console platform at the time. They're just not historically known to produce bad performing games. They jumped to UE5 and they've had some hiccups. So that's where this is going to kind of, that initial first or second game on the engine, they're learning. They're dealing with having to work with a group of engineers and developers that they've never had to deal with. They have a completely different CI pipeline and pool and merge workflow. So I think studios are going to start asking themselves, was the trade-off of maintaining my own fork of Unreal Engine beneficial versus maintaining my own in-house engine and having ownership of that IP, which, by the way, you could turn around and license out to other devs. So that's where, like, CryEngine, Lumberyard, these other engines, ID Software, ID Tech, that's where they are sitting on a gold mine as far as intellectual property is concerned. And who knows, if ID Tech changed their mantra in the future, they could be a major competitor with Unreal,
And now that you mentioned the business side of it, I was watching a very famous YouTuber called Luke Stevens this morning discussing something about The Witcher 4, because he listened to like the earnings call for CDPR. And apparently, one of the things that investors are really happy with is the fact that CDPR choose Unreal Engine, because they are pretty much offloading any engine work to Epic. It's not under ballpark anymore, so they don't have to pay for that.
Yeah, so there's going to be one, The Witcher's going to be a huge marketing flagship for Epic. It is in Epic's best interest for that game to run really well. So even if they have some form of like, let's just say outsourced, because I know that's probably what it is. There's probably an agreement there for the cost to be really good between the two, because it's good for Epic to have The Witcher on their engine, but it's also good for CD Projekt Red to be utilizing an engine like Unreal instead of internally maintaining their own. Where that harmony breaks down is if the engine decides to move in a direction that is not in the same vein or direction as CD Projekt Red's project. So I would say that Valorant probably had more work to do to get UE5 to a place that was as performant as UE4 for their title. And the relationship between Epic and Valorant, or should I say Riot, was probably a little different than the relationship between CD Projekt Red and Epic. And the cost to do the business between the two partners probably reflected the difference there too. But yeah, I talked to CD Projekt Red devs at the last Unreal Fest I went to, and they're really excited not to be having to maintain their own engine internally. they are excited to be able to push the stuff that they're working on back up to main for other developers to use and for it to become part of UE5's core. And I only wish that the other AAA developers that run into issues, like developers of Metal Gear, you know, Servios, and all of these VR developers that have been pushing, you know, Pavlov guys, contractor guys that have been pushing UE5 to really be performant on low and middle end hardware. I want more mobile developers to be on the engine so that they can bring some of their learnings and push that back up. But yeah, that's where the benefit really is. But the con is, like, a lot of those PRs might get open, but they may not be pulled because they're counterproductive to the direction that the engine wants to go on the high end. You know, the lower you keep the floor, the more you restrict the ceiling. So it's one of those balancing acts.
Yeah, and I do have an example of kind of like the opposite happening. So I don't know if you remember back in the day when people liked Bioware games, because it seems like nobody likes Bioware games anymore. But back in the
Oh, dude,
day,
I love BioWare games. Star Wars: The Old Republic, man, and yeah, like I loved BioWare games.
yeah, no, but I mean
What
the
was the
recent one.
what was the latest one I played on the Xbox 360? It was like the controversial because it had multiple endings, and it was a, I want to say it was a trilogy. Um, Man, you had the little launcher in space. It was like a first person, third person. It had vehicles. Uh,
Was this Battlefront?
no, it was like the space one. There was a inappropriate scene between an alien and a human in there. Like a
Oh,
lot of people talked about it, but um, man, it'll come to mind.
yeah. So what I meant is, in the case of Bioware, they had an engine forced on them, or at least that's what the reporting said. That back in the day, for Mass Effect and for older games,
It
they were
was Mass
using.
Effect. That was the game.
Oh
That
yeah,
was the
there
game.
you go.
Look.
So they were using Unreal Engine 3, and all of a sudden they had to switch to Frostbite. Frostbite was the engine that Dice was famously using for their first-person shooter games, which, from the looks of it, it wasn't tailored to do third-person open-world RPGs, and BioWare had a horrible time at it, and the games didn't turn out so well. And one of the things that it was reported was because they were forced into using an engine that off the shelf was not made to function with the capabilities that they're needed for their game. So that is the example that I give when people ask, well, in-house engines are always the best. Well, not really, because there's examples of in-house engine not working for their developers just because the studio make a decision that wasn't the most optimal one. The other one that comes to mind is Bethesda, where their creation engine, which is dinosaur-like at this point. I've spoken to people that do a lot of mods and make a living doing mods for Bethesda games, and one of the things they told me is it's spaghetti code all around.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A lot of this is like, you know, when I talk about studio IP, um, intellectual property doesn't just mean like the software and the value behind the software. It also means like the intellectual property that exists between your engineer's ears. Like if you have a dev studio that's, and we see this going on today, a lot of people don't think about the transition from, you know, going from using one engine and the amount of investment that it takes to move to something like UE5 if you were rocking an in-house engine. That's why a lot of times you see studios that are familiar with Unreal that are doing these remasters and not the original studio that built it on, say, you know, Oblivion's or Skyrim's original engine. So, you know, that intellect, like that transition into using a tool set that you're not familiar with. The same would be said for anyone that just says, I'm going to up and leave Unity and go to Unreal. Like, you're going to have the steepest learning curve ever. Like, does the foundational principles of what you're doing stay the same? Yeah, your data types stay the same. Yeah, working within 3D is, you know, if you know what a UV is and you know what triangles are and you're familiar with a 3D pipeline, you can kind of get your way through it. But actually going to market with a game, the engineering that is involved there, understanding how that renderer pipeline works, understanding how the different material pipelines work, understanding the tool set. If you're in Unity, you're used to building out your components, are leaning on the app store available to you to utilize tools that have existed there for a really long time. And you've kind of developed this muscle memory around the engine and how it works. And you go into Unreal and it's like, oh, I don't need to go download a vehicle kit because they have a wheeled vehicle component right here in the engine. But you also don't know that that thing is a buggy mess if you try to use it stock out of the
Yeah,
gate.
right.
So you got to go modify it just a tad, like, and what are the right chaos settings? And it works a lot differently than physics. So, I mean, there's little nuances like that are happening right now with these studios that are moving from in-house engines to over to UE5, and they're having to learn kind of these growing pains behind quote unquote the Unreal way. And I've done a video on that in the past of like sometimes you expect things to function a certain way based on where you've come from. And then you get in Unreal Engine, you're like, why was this done this way? Why is my coordinate system this way, a coordinate system and my widget this way in this scene, but it's this way in this other scene? Um, and a lot of that stuff is when it hits you for the first time, you don't really know how to approach it or deal with it. Or you find yourself reinventing the wheel when you didn't have to, and you're looking back and you're like, wow, if I only knew that then. Hindsight is crazy.
Yeah.
Um, so
So
that's, it is true. Like you try to make an engine do something it wasn't tailored for, you're working against the grain. But the same can be true for moving from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5. And Unreal Engine 5 wants you to do something within their new paradigm of nanite, virtualized textures, Lumen, ray tracing. And you're like, whoa, I just want to make a really simple, cheap, stylized game. Like it's the same can be true regardless of where you are. Um, and ultimately, it's really easy for anyone to go, oh, this all falls on the devs. But at the end of the day, dude, you have a time allocation budget and you have a deadline to meet. And a lot of the times you're gonna be met with a really strong D personality at the head of these companies. And they've already been sold the pipe dream of like, this is what we're using because it's gonna save us time and money. Go get it done. I don't care what problems you run into, you know?
do you and this is a question. The answer to me it's yes, but I want to know what do you think about this? Do you think one reason that a lot of AAA studios are moving to Unreal is because of outsourcing? So because when you have a studio where you just send them stuff, and I've seen a lot of video game creds have a lot of outsourced studios, it's easier for the external studio to pick up Unreal than to pick up your in-house engine.
Yeah, I mean, that's where intellectual property retention comes into play, right? So as a studio, you can hire people and have them specialized for your engine. Or if you have a highly available engine that is taught in universities or schools or whatever, which Unity and Unreal are both known for, um, then the talent pool becomes easier to find resources for, and that that is value in and of itself. That isn't value, it's value added to your organization that you yourself didn't have to maintain because it's a standard, because it is available, globally, because universities can place stock in it and teach on it. Then it does push the industry into this realm where they're like, hey, if we move to UE5, our chances of finding talent are going to be higher versus having someone to maintain an in-house thing. So there is value add there, and it's I don't want to poke too hard into what's been going on in the industry, but I mean, you would have to be a blind, one-eyed patched pirate not to be able to see that layoffs have been crazy, and a lot
Oh
of the
yeah.
talent that has been in the marketplace, or should I say, in this industry over the last decade, the senior levels, and I would say even the high-end junior levels, have been pushed out in exchange for entry-level developers, because the pipeline dream, the prospect has been, if you adopt this, you can get more done with less talented people, you know?
All right, everybody. What other topics do you like me to discuss with Wild Dogs? Let me know in the comment sections down below. Remember to subscribe to his channel and his Discord. I'm going to leave links to all of his socials in the description down below. So make sure you subscribe to him and follow him, because he's an amazing developer that you should follow if you're a game developer and you have any questions when it comes to game engines, optimizations, and all that. Thank you so much for watching all the way to this point. Leave a like on the video because it goes a long way, and I'll see you in the next one.